Even if you're only mildly plugged into enthusiast vehicles, you'll have heard of the BMW E30. I feel like everyone has seen one of these at some point, whether it was your neighborhood granny driving her convertible down the street, or your favorite rapper with his E30 M3 on the album cover. Today we'll be going over the BMW E30 3 Series in full detail, and this video should help serve as a definitive guide for every E30 available, the different models, and what distinguishes them. So the BMW E30 was the second generation of BMW 3 Series, succeeding the more often forgotten about BMW E21. From this generation of 3 Series would spawn the E30 M3, a car which you all know and love, and it would turn out to be one of BMW's most influential models in helping to curate a fresh new brand identity all around the world. The small, squared, stylish icon was an entry point to affordable luxury for thousands worldwide. Around 350,000 E30s were sold in the United States, and globally around 2 million of these cars were produced and sold, so there is no shortage of these vehicles. You can find them pretty much anywhere worldwide. Of those 2 million, 17,000 were M3s, 5,115 of which were sold in the United States. Throughout the 12-year production run, the E30 was available in a multitude of different body styles, including coupes, sedans, convertibles, and wagons. E30 denoting the chassis code of the vehicles, which were built from 1982 to 1994. So there are two distinct generations of the E30. It was built between 1982 and 1987, which were built including a very large aluminum and rubber 5 mph bumper, and those offered from 1988 to 1994, which used the sleeker plastic bumper. In the US market, the E30 was initially offered in 1985 as only a sedan and coupe. 1986 was when we saw the convertible introduced, followed by the wagon in 1988, which unfortunately was never sold in America, and in the same year, the M3, a model built so that BMW could compete in touring car racing. The most commonly encountered submodels for the E30 are the 318, the 325e, the 325i, and the 325iX, all using the same chassis but with key differences between them. The two most common engines used in the E30 are the M42 B18 1.8-liter 4-cylinder, which was used in the 318, which produced 134 horsepower and 127 pound-feet of torque. The M20 B25 2.5-liter inline-6 was used in the 325i, the 325is, and the 325iX, producing 168 horsepower and 164 pound-feet of torque. The M20 appeared in America in 1987, while the M42 was introduced around the same time. The later 318i and IS models switched from the original M10 B18 105 horsepower engine to the new M42 B18. In the early stages, there was a 325e model, and the 325e and ES featured a larger displacement 2.7-liter inline-6 called the M20 B27, a really weird engine for the time, which was aimed at keeping RPMs low and torque high, preserving fuel economy. It produced around 125 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. The E30 was offered with multiple transmission options, including a 5-speed manual and a 4-speed automatic. The X in 325iX denotes the model being all-wheel drive. The iX was equipped with a fairly advanced all-wheel drive system at the time, which was built by ZF. And the M20 in the 325iX is actually significantly different than the M20 in the rear-wheel drive versions, due to variations in the oil pan and certain engine accessories. Now, you might have heard me throw around the term I and IS at the back of some of these models. The S in IS standing for Sport, and it was typically the name used for the two-door, but the difference wasn't only in the number of doors. The IS also came equipped with a limited slip differential, along with slightly more aggressive spring and shock setup. Now onto my favorite variant of the E30, the M3. In the 80s, BMW had big aspirations for DTM, specifically in Group A. The Group A regulations required at least 5,000 road legal copies of a race car to be sold within 12 months in order for a vehicle to be allowed to race. So the idea behind the first E30 M3 was to make a racing coupe which was available as a street version. And nobody foresaw what a roaring success the M3 would become, not just on the world's greatest racetracks, but on everyday roads as well. The M3 was offered with the infamous S14 B23 2.3-liter 4-cylinder with just under 200 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. The S14 was based off of the original M10 block that BMW used in the first variations of the 318, but with massive improvements. Increased displacement in a new twin-cam 4-valve head, which was based on the head from the S38 out of the E28 M5. This allowed for extremely peppy but also a robust engine that would prove very reliable in these race cars. During its years of production between 1986 and 1994, the M3's performance consistently improved. In 1988, the Evo 2 version was launched on the market, and this featured 220 horsepower. Among other things, there was also a revised spoiler and one-piece bucket seats. The final stage of the M3 was ignited by BMW Motorsport GmbH in 1990, called the M3 Sport Evolution, also known as the Evo 3. The main change being modifications to the engine. Displacement was increased to 2.5 liters, resulting in 238 horsepower, making it the most powerful model in BMW's E30 3 Series, and only 600 units of these cars were built. The concept for this engine actually came from Paul Roche, who was responsible for the engine development in the Formula 1 racing team for BMW at the time. The differences in the M3 are not just limited to the engine though. Lightweight aluminum suspension components compared to the big heavy steel ones on the base 3 Series allowed for handling improvements. Bigger brakes and driveline improvements helped with track performance and reliability. The M3's C-pillar was flatter and wider than on the two-door 3 Series, improving its aerodynamics. And the M3 also had wider fenders than the base 3 Series. There was also differences in the windshield and roof, and the Evo 3 featured modified front wheel arches to allow for up to 18-inch wheels. So for those of you with a late model plastic bumper E30 thinking you can throw some wider fenders on your car and call it an M3, it might not be that easy. For 5 years, the E30 M3 dominated racing across the globe and went on to be known as the most successful touring sports car ever. In its most powerful variants, the E30 M3 came equipped with a 2.5-liter S14 capable of 360 horsepower in their full-spec racing vehicles. So that's a high-level rundown of the E30 BMW 3 Series. Outside of what I mentioned, there are a lot of models which were built for the European markets, such as the 316, the 320i, a diesel version, and the 333i in South Africa, but those I will save for another video. As usual, I thank you for watching. If you want to see more automotive content, consider subscribing. I do a variety of stuff on this channel. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.